This is The Space Shot, episode 308 for March 18th, 2018. Messenger. I'm John Molnix. In the late hours of March 17th, or the early morning of March 18th, depending on your time zone, the Messenger spacecraft performed an orbital insertion burn that sent it into orbit around the planet Mercury. Messenger, or the Mercury Surface Space Environment, Geochemistry, and Ranging Mission, launched on August 3, 2004. This spacecraft performed 3 gravity assist maneuvers and 3 flybys of Mercury before entering orbit 7 years ago today after launching. This spacecraft was quite small. It had a sunshade protecting the science instruments on the spacecraft that was about 8 feet long, barely longer than the tallest basketball players that are playing in March Madness right now. Behind that 6 by 8 foot sunshade, engineers packed color cameras, communication arrays, and a plethora of other science instruments. Mercury has an incredibly fast orbit around the Sun. It only takes 88 Earth days for Mercury to complete one orbit, and this posed a few interesting challenges for the Messenger team. Orbital maneuvers had to be timed to coincide with the times the spacecraft could orient its sunshade to protect the small spacecraft from the Sun. There were just a few days during the Mercurian year that this was possible, so there was almost continual work being done to keep Messenger in the proper orbit. Another interesting part of orbiting Mercury is that a day is longer than a year. Think about how crazy that would be here for Earth. 365 days of sunlight followed by another 365 of night. I'll go ahead and pass on that. According to NASA, the Messenger spacecraft was designed to answer 6 questions about Mercury. First, why is the planet so dense? Mercury is the densest of all the terrestrial planets in our solar system, and studying why that's the case helps scientists understand the formation of the planet and our solar system. Second, what is the geologic history of Mercury? Before Messenger arrived, less than half of its surface had been imaged in detail. Capturing an accurate map of the planet helps geologists study the history of this strange world. Third, what is the nature of Mercury's magnetic field? Fourth, what is the structure of the planet's core? Fifth, what are the unusual materials at the planet's poles? Radar images show that there are bright areas where the temperature could be cold enough, even on the hottest planet in our solar system, that ice could exist deep in surface craters. And finally, number 6, what volatiles are important to Mercury? The planet's atmosphere is fragile, and it's called an exosphere because of its minuscule nature. The Messenger spacecraft had a very unique orbit that was also highly elliptical. This elliptical orbit meant that the spacecraft passed close to the planet, coming within 124 miles at perigee and going as high as 9,420 at apogee. This egg-shaped orbit allowed for the Messenger team to regulate the temperature of the spacecraft, keeping it from overheating as it passed close to the hot surface of the planet. Quote, as Mercury moves around the Sun, the Messenger spacecraft stays in an approximately fixed orientation with its sunshade facing the Sun. So effectively, the planet rotates beneath the spacecraft. Different parts of the surface are illuminated depending on where Mercury is in its year, so the spacecraft can view the surface of the planet under every possible lighting condition. I'll be linking to that NASA article in the show notes, so be sure to check it out. The final parts of the Messenger mission saw the spacecraft controllers take the small robotic explorer extremely close to the planet's surface. Messenger's mission came to an end on April 30th, 2015. The spacecraft had completed a 10-year and 8-month-long mission, 4 of which were spent in orbit around the smallest planet in our solar system. Messenger impacted the surface of Mercury at 8,700 miles per hour, over 11 times the speed of sound. To give you some perspective, traveling at that speed would take you from New York City to Los Angeles in about 20 minutes. I have 2 pieces of Soviet space history I want to cover today. Voskhod 2 launched on March 18, 1965, from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. During this flight, Alexei Leonov became the first person to perform an EVA. His extravehicular activity lasted for just 20 minutes out of the 26-hour mission, but it was a short and very important first step for a critical procedure that's been used in human spaceflight ever since. Upon re-entering the atmosphere, the recovery operation sounded a bit dramatic. According to NASA, quote, "A manually controlled re-entry was performed because of a malfunction of the automatic orientation devices for the retrofire, and the spacecraft landed in a pine forest far north of the target area. After locating the spacecraft, 1 day was required to cut through the forest and bring the crew out on skis. That sounds like a pretty wild ride home." I do have one somber piece of space history to share here at the end. On March 18, 1980, a Soviet rocket that was carrying a military satellite exploded on the launch pad, killing 48 people. The news of this tragedy didn't come out until years after the initial event due to the secrecy of the Soviet space program at that time. I'm linking to 2 articles in the show notes that go over a few more details of this horrific explosion. On a bit of a happier note, tomorrow is Aerospace Day at the Colorado State Capitol. I'm going to be there all day, and I'll be sharing some cool content on Twitter and Instagram throughout the day, so make sure you follow me so you don't miss it. I'll be sharing pictures on Facebook once I'm home later that night. I'd be incredibly grateful if all of you could share the podcast with your friends and family, tag one of them, and let them know about your favorite episode. I'd also really appreciate it if you could venture into the Apple Podcasts app or your podcast app of choice and leave a review for The Space Shot. A steady stream of reviews helps ensure that the podcast is more visible in the Apple Podcasts app. As always, the show notes have more information on today's episode. You can hit me up on Instagram and Twitter. Find me at John Molnix. I'm always up to chat. You can also connect with me on Facebook. Just search The Space Shot or click the link in the show notes and you'll find me. I'm John Molnix, and I'll catch you on the flip side.